She fled to save her son, but upon crossing the border, she watched as they tore him from her arms. Isela sought asylum with hope, but encountered the cruel silence of separation. 3 months later, their reunion broke their hearts. Her son no longer recognized her, a real, painful and unforgettable story. Isela Mendoza didn't cry when she left her home. She had no more tears. At 28, she had learned to hold back her crying so as not to frighten her son. She lived in San Pedro Sula, Honduras, one of the most dangerous cities on the continent, where going out with fear had become routine. But that day, fear turned into something else. It turned into decision. If you like interesting stories, please like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. We'd love to hear from you. For months, life had become hell. The threats came with anonymous notes, with whispers at the door, with motorcycles passing slowly in front of her house. But nothing was as heartbreaking as what happened one Tuesday afternoon. Andre, her 7-year-old son, returned from school with red eyes and trembling hands. He wouldn't speak. Isela hugged him tight. She checked him over. He wasn't hurt, but something had happened. Only at bedtime, curled up next to her, did he whisper, "A man made me carry a bag to another man. He said if I didn't do it, he would kill my teacher." Isela remained silent. She felt the blood drain from her body. She knew what that meant. The narcos were using her son as a mule, 7 years old, her child, her treasure. She didn't hesitate anymore. That same night, while Andre slept, she packed the little they had. 2 changes of clothes, a drawing notebook, birth certificates, a water bottle, and a few crumpled bills. At dawn, with a torn backpack and a broken heart, they headed north. The first kilometers they traveled by bus, then in the back of a truck, and finally, on foot. They passed through dusty villages, crossed the border with Guatemala without looking back. In each town, they heard stories of others like them. Mothers with children, grandparents with grandchildren, teenagers alone, all running, all afraid, all dreaming of the United States like someone dreams of air when drowning. Andre asked little. He only wanted to know if where they were going he could go to school. Isela always responded with the same thing. "There, no one will force you to be afraid, my love. You'll be able to sleep peacefully." On the road, they encountered danger, extortion, solidarity, and betrayal. Authorities who stole their money, people who offered help only to disappear later. But there was also a Guatemalan woman who gave them bread and warm milk without asking for anything in return. And a young Salvadoran migrant who helped them cross a stretch of river, carrying Andre on his shoulders. Isela endured everything, the hunger, the foot pain, the cold nights outdoors, for only one reason: to never return to the place where her son had been used as a war shield. When they reached Tijuana, they were no longer the same. She had lost several pounds. Andre barely spoke. He had dark circles, dirty clothes, hands cracked from dust. But even so, when they spotted the fence separating Mexico from the United States, Isela hugged him tightly. For the first time in weeks, she cried. This time, yes, because she was convinced that the worst was behind them. "There, my love, almost there. We just have to tell them the truth," she whispered to him. "They're going to help us. You're going to be okay." They waited their turn. A migration agent received them. Isela repeated what she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her head. She told about the neighborhood, the threats, the bag they forced her son to carry. She mentioned the names she remembered, the places. She offered documents, photos. She requested asylum. She did it with a firm voice and eyes full of desperation. She believed that moment would be the beginning of a new life, but she didn't know what was coming. That night they slept in an improvised cell, separated by hanging blankets. It was cold. There were no mattresses. Andre curled up next to her, and for the first time in days, slept deeply. It was the last night they slept together. The next day, an agent approached. He spoke in English, but another translated half-heartedly. The child will be taken for medical examination and then to a special place for minors. It's temporary. You must cooperate. Isela tried to understand. Why couldn't she go with him? Why didn't they stay together? Andre clung to her waist. He was crying. She was screaming. No one explained anything. He's my son. I didn't abandon him. Please don't take him from me. But no one listened. She only saw cold hands taking Andre. She heard his heartbreaking scream, "Mommy!" and then silence. Isela fell to her knees. She didn't know if it was the pain, the shock, or the weight of a decision that she never believed would end like this. They handcuffed her. They put her in another cell. And then, yes, fear returned. A new one. Darker. More devastating. Now she was truly alone. The morning they crossed the border between Honduras and Guatemala on foot, the sun beat down violently on their backs. The heat was brutal, but no more than the fear Isela felt with each step. Little Andre, with his Spider-Man backpack and worn shoes, walked without complaining. He didn't understand everything, but he knew they had to reach the north. That's what his mom said, as if it were a promise, as if the north was synonymous with salvation. Upon arriving in Chiquimula, they slept in an abandoned bus station. Isela placed her body between the child and the concrete floor. Around them, other families did the same. Single women, children without parents, tired elderly people. One of them, a Nicaraguan man with a rough voice, said something that remained etched in her mind. Here, nobody escapes for pleasure. Here we all flee from something. And it was true. She was no different. She was fleeing a neighborhood that had rotted in silence, from police who did nothing, from criminals who knew everything. Just a week ago, a child from Andre's block had disappeared. He was 9 years old. They never saw him again. And when Isela asked, they told her it was better not to talk. That's how it was there. The journey continued for days. Sometimes they got a ride in cargo trucks, where migrants hid among boxes of vegetables or sacks of rice. Other times they walked along dusty paths, without shade or water, under a sun that burned their skin. Andre started getting a fever. Isela would wet his forehead with a handkerchief and sing softly so he wouldn't cry. She couldn't afford to stop. At the border with Mexico, everything became more dangerous. A group of armed men intercepted them in a lonely stretch of the Chiapas jungle. They asked for money. One of them touched Isela's arm, smiling disgustingly. She pushed him, and the man pulled out a machete. It was then that another migrant, a young man from Veracruz, stepped in and shouted that it wasn't worth it, that they should let them go. Fortunately, they did, but not before taking from Isela the last 130 Mexican pesos she had hidden in her bra. When they reached Tapachula, they took refuge for a few days in a migrant house. It was a dirty building, with mattresses thrown on the floor and rationed food. But there Andre could play with other children for the first time in weeks. He laughed, he ran. He drew a house with his mother and a huge sun. He called it Our House in the North. Isela watched him from a corner, with red eyes and an exhausted body. She knew that moment of peace was a brief pause, that soon they would have to continue, and that the road would be even crueler. In Oaxaca, they tried to board the freight train that everyone calls La Bestia. Isela had heard stories of migrants who lost arms, legs, even their lives falling from the train. That's why she didn't do it. She walked with Andre along the highway, sleeping at bus stops and gas stations. They ate what they found, sometimes a bag of stale bread, other times nothing. Andre no longer asked for food. He only asked if there was much left. "Almost there, my love. We're almost there," Isela would say, though she didn't know if it was true. In Puebla, they both got sick. Fever, diarrhea, vomiting. An evangelical pastor found them lying near a terminal. He gave them saline solution, hot soup, a clean bed for 2 nights. When saying goodbye, Isela wanted to thank him. The man only said, "God is watching all of this. What you do for your son, he knows it." That thought accompanied her as they continued their route, that someone, God, destiny, whatever, was watching, that all the pain wasn't in vain. Upon reaching Tijuana, the air had a different weight, drier, harsher. It was the threshold of the dream. There, among streets full of improvised shelters, Isela began to see up close what it meant to reach the border. Long lines, migrants sleeping on the street, children coughing, desperate women. Some had been waiting months for an appointment, others had been deported, some didn't even know what to do. Isela didn't have time to wait. She couldn't risk someone reporting her. She knew that if she returned, death awaited them. They slept for 5 nights on the sidewalk in front of the El Chaparral checkpoint. Andre used his backpack as a pillow. One night, a group of Mexican police asked them to move. It was raining. Andre was cold. Isela took off her sweater and covered him, hugging him tightly. "All this will be worth it, my love. I promise you." On the 6th day, at dawn, she made her decision. She was going to turn herself in. She had read that requesting asylum was a right, that if she told her story, if she explained everything, someone would listen. So she walked to the El Paso crossing, with her son's hand in hers. They passed through one gate, then another, and waited. A border agent looked at them, asked them to stay there. Then others arrived. They took their information. They told them to wait more. Isela, for the first time in days, felt something like hope. She wasn't crying. She was sure they were about to reach the place where they could start over, where Andre wouldn't have to look over his shoulder walking to school, where fear wouldn't be their language. She couldn't know that door to the north wasn't an entrance. It was a trap. When they finally crossed the last checkpoint, already inside the immigration processing station in El Paso, Texas, Isela felt her legs trembling. It wasn't fatigue. It was something deeper. It was contained fear. It was hope broken into 1,000 pieces and rebuilt with blind faith. Next to her, Andre held her hand tightly, his small, dirty, thin fingers squeezed as if he knew something was about to change. He wore a blue t-shirt that no longer fit him and shorts with a hole in the knee. Even so, his face had a silent dignity that broke his mother's soul. They were taken to a room with grey walls, cameras in the corners, and cold lights on the ceiling. There, a tall officer with an expressionless face began asking questions in English. Isela didn't understand. She could only make out words like name, country, asylum. Fortunately, another agent, this time a Latina woman, appeared shortly after. "Do you speak Spanish?" she asked Isela. "Yes, please. I need to request asylum. I'm fleeing. My son, he's not safe in our country. They used him to..." The woman raised her hand for her to stop. "We're going to take your statement," calmly. During the next hour, Isela recounted everything, from the first threat to the day they escaped. She gave names, places, dates. She described in detail the moment her son was forced to deliver a bag with drugs. She cried only once when she spoke about the last night in Honduras, when Andre asked her if they were going to die. The agent took notes without showing judgment. She didn't console her, didn't interrupt her. She just listened. And when she finished, she simply said, "Thank you. We're going to process your case." Isela nodded. She didn't know what that meant exactly, but she wanted to believe it was good, that it meant safety, a clean bed, hot food, maybe a place to rest, so Andre could recover his childhood. But hope is treacherous when there's no compassion behind the words. After they finished taking her fingerprints and photographing her, a new agent appeared. He asked her to follow him. He was a white man with dark glasses who barely looked at her. "The child will be taken to another area for medical examination," an assistant translated with an automatic voice. "And can I go with him?" Isela asked immediately. "No, ma'am. It's protocol. You will be transferred to another detention center." Andre, who until that moment had remained silent, tightened his grip on his mother's hand. "Mommy, I don't want to go without you. You're not going alone, my love. I'm with you, right?" she said, looking at the agent. But no one answered. A second later, another official approached from behind and separated Andre with a swift motion. The child screamed, kicked, clung to his mother's leg. "No, Mommy!" Isela screamed. She screamed with all her strength. She threw herself forward, but another agent stopped her and held her by the shoulders. Her body trembled, her legs refused to move. Andre stretched his arms desperately. "Mommy, don't leave me!" That was the last time she heard his voice. The metal door closed with a sharp bang. The sound resonated in her chest like an explosion. Isela froze. She didn't understand. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had only asked for help. Wasn't that what she was supposed to do? That's when the handcuffs came. "Why are you handcuffing me? My son, let me see him." "It's procedure," responded a faceless voice. They led her down a long, white hallway without windows. Each step took her further from Andre. The echo of his screams still resonated in her head. She felt like she was running out of air. She tried to memorize every detail, her son's voice, the smell of his skin, the way his hands trembled, as if that could protect him. Upon arriving at the new center, they took her shoelaces and pant strings. They gave her a metallic blanket, one of those that doesn't warm anything. They put her in a cell with other women. All had the same face, exhausted, defeated, broken. "Your son too?" asked a Salvadoran woman sitting against the wall. Isela couldn't speak. She just nodded. That night she didn't sleep. Sitting in the corner of the cell, she clutched in her hands the last note Andre had drawn in Tijuana. A house with two figures, one big and one small, holding hands. He had written, "Mommy and me, always together." Isela kissed the paper, closed her eyes, and for the first time since the journey began, she thought maybe she had made an irreparable mistake, that the country that promised justice had betrayed her. But she still didn't know everything. She still didn't know that for weeks she wouldn't receive a single piece of news about her son, that she wouldn't have the right to a phone call, that her letters wouldn't leave, that Andre was completely alone. And she, locked up, with nails broken from scratching so much at the walls of her soul. The detention center was a place where time didn't run, where days melted into each other as if the clock had surrendered to abandonment. The walls were grey without windows. The air was dry, loaded with a constant smell of dampness, sweat, and sadness. The lights never completely turned off. Isela had trouble knowing if it was day or night. After being separated from Andre, they put her in a cell with 5 other women. All had lost something, a child, a brother, a country. The pain was collective, but each lived it in silence. Some cried in their sleep, others simply stared into space. No one asked too much. In that place, stories were daggers that hurt more when told. Isela barely ate. Food trays arrived at uncertain hours, with minimal and cold portions. She only drank water to avoid fainting. She had lost track of time, but she knew something inside her was breaking. Her body was still there, but her soul was trapped in the moment she saw her son scream her name. "Mommy!" That word haunted her in every corner of the center. She heard it in the hallways, in the echo of metal doors, in the whisper of the fan that never stopped humming. She heard it when she closed her eyes, and every time she heard it, a part of her died. The agents gave her no answers. She asked every day about her son. She begged them to speak with someone, to know where Andre was, if he was okay, if he was cold, if he was eating, if he was sleeping. "We don't have that information, Mom," they repeated over and over, as if it were a script. "He's my son. I just want to know if he's alive." Wait for the process. The process, that damned word that seemed to justify everything, the indifference, the silence, the pain. What was this process that allowed the state to take her son without an order, without an explanation, without a date to see him again? Every time an agent passed nearby, Isola would jump up. "Do you bring news? Can I speak with someone?" But the answers were always the same, evasive, cold, mechanical. One night, without strength, she knelt in front of one of the security cameras and shouted with all her might, "Andre, it's me! I didn't abandon you! I'm here! I love you, my love! Don't be afraid! I'm here!" But there was no response. Only the constant hum of the air conditioning and the sound of a distant lock. The other women looked at her, some with tears in their eyes, others with resignation. One of them, a Guatemalan mother who had been there for more than 2 weeks, approached and hugged her silently. They didn't need words, not anymore. Pain united them more than any language. Days later, Isela decided to write letters. She didn't know if they would leave the center, but she needed to write to her son. Writing became her only way to resist. "Andre, my heaven, I don't know where you are, but I'm thinking of you every second. I didn't abandon you. I never would. They took me from you, but I love you with every part of my soul. When I close my eyes, I imagine your laughter. I imagine your arms around my neck. Hold on, my love. Mommy is fighting for you." She kept the letters under the thin mattress where she slept. Some she folded carefully and kissed before hiding them. Each one was a promise, a reminder that a bond still existed, even if no one respected it, even if the state tried to destroy it. One morning, while they were cleaning the hallway, Isela heard 2 agents talking quietly. Another child escaped from the shelter. 7 years old, I think. Doesn't speak English. Just cried for his mother. Isela felt a chill down her spine. She approached. "Do you know if his name is Andre? Did my son escape?" The men turned around, annoyed by the interruption. "We don't discuss other cases. Return to your cell." She sat back down. Her chest hurt. Her son was 7 years old, didn't speak English, and cried for her. It could be him or not. And that uncertainty was worse than any answer, because doubt settled in like an incurable disease. Each day without news was torture. Every night, Isela fell asleep with the image of her son alone, scared, asking for her. She wondered if he still remembered her, if he was eating, if someone comforted him when he cried, if he still called her mommy. And no matter how hard she tried to hold on to faith, the darkness grew. Her body hurt, her nails, gums, back hurt, but nothing hurt as much as her chest, like that enormous void where her son used to be. Days passed, or weeks. She wasn't sure anymore. One afternoon, a lawyer from the center appeared. His name was Jorge Ramirez. He was a volunteer, part of an organization that helped migrants separated from their children. He asked her to tell her story from the beginning. Isela, with a trembling voice, recounted everything, once again, this time with anger, with desperation, with tears. Jorge took notes, recorded parts of the testimony, and at the end said, "This is a violation of your rights. What they did to you is not legal. We're going to fight." Isela didn't respond. She just looked at him with empty eyes. She no longer wanted promises. She wanted facts. She wanted to hug her son. She wanted to stop writing letters that no one would read. That night, she wrote one more. "Andre, today a man said he's going to help us. I don't know if it's true, but I want you to know something. I never stopped looking for you. I never stopped loving you, and I never will." Then she curled up on the floor, hugging her sweatshirt as if it were her son. The mother's instinct remained intact, even though the system tried to tear it from her. The paper they gave her at the detention center was thin, rough, and they only allowed her to use it once a week. They handed her a sheet and a pencil without a sharp point, as if writing were a dangerous privilege. Isela anxiously awaited that moment, not to write her testimony or ask for help. She did it to talk to her son, to continue being a mother. Every time they put the sheet in her hand, she would go to a corner of the cell and, with her body bent, begin to write slowly. She had no certainty that anyone would read what she wrote, but writing had become a ritual of resistance. Her only way to protect Andre, even with words. My love, today I dreamed of you again. I dreamed we were at home, cooking rice pudding the way you like it. You were laughing, you hugged me, you told me you weren't afraid anymore. I don't know if you're eating, if someone's taking care of you, if you still remember my name, but I do. I remember every inch of your face, every mole, every laugh, every tear. Don't forget me. Mommy is here. I didn't leave. I would never leave. She folded each letter carefully, as if folding a piece of her son's clothing. She handed them to the guards, hoping that somehow they would reach Andre's hands. But over time, she understood that those letters didn't leave there. They read them maybe, or threw them away, or kept them as evidence of something no one understood. One night, she heard a young Salvadoran girl crying softly in the bunk next to hers. She was 16 and had crossed with her 5-year-old younger brother. They had been separated too. Isela, hurt to recognize in her eyes the same emptiness that consumed her, she approached and hugged her without saying a word. In that place, comfort didn't come with explanations. It came with gestures, with a shared blanket, with a saved piece of bread, with the gaze of a broken woman who still found strength to care for another. Each day at the center was the same. Wake up without knowing if it was Monday or Thursday, without news, without answers. Breakfast was hard cookies and powdered juice. Lunch sometimes, poorly cooked rice, and something that looked like meat, but tasted like nothing. Showers were timed minutes under freezing water. Everything was calculated so one would forget who they were. So you'd stop feeling. But Isela refused. Every night before sleep, she would take from her pants pocket a small drawing Andre had made on the journey. It was a little house, 2 stick figures holding hands, and a yellow sun above. He had told her, "This is you and this is me. No one separates us." Now she hid it under her clothes like an amulet, as proof that once upon a time her son had felt her close. When she couldn't take it anymore, she wrote another letter. "Today, I counted the days since they separated us. I think it's been more than 30. I can't remember your voice anymore. It hurts to say it, but it's true. At night, I try to repeat your words, so I don't forget them. Sometimes I think I'm going crazy. But I hold on to you, even though I don't know where you are, even though I don't know if you miss me, I'm still here, I'm still resisting." Some days volunteers would arrive, young lawyers, workers from organizations, translators who spoke Spanish with an accent. They asked questions, filled out forms, promised follow-up. But then they'd leave, and everything would return to the same desperate stillness. Jorge, the Mexican-American lawyer who had heard her case, returned after a week. This time he arrived with papers in hand. "We're moving your case, Isela. We're going to file a complaint for unjustified separation. It's a complicated process, but there's hope." "And Andre?" she asked, without hesitation. Jorge lowered his gaze. He opened a folder, hesitated, and then said, "We believe he's in a shelter in Arizona. I can't guarantee it yet, but we're doing everything possible to confirm his location." "Does he know I'm here?" "No. The children don't receive that information." Isela felt the floor open beneath her. Her son, her 7-year-old child, was somewhere unknown, alone, without knowing she was still alive, that she was looking for him, that she hadn't abandoned him. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry, a contained, bitter cry that didn't seek comfort. Jorge left a tissue on the table. He waited, said nothing. When he left, she wrote another letter. "Today they told me you're in Arizona. I don't know where that is, but it sounds far. It breaks my soul to know you're alone, without knowing I'm still here. I speak for you every day, even though no one listens. I fight for you, even though I'm trapped, and I will until you're back with me. Don't forget your name. Don't forget mine." That night, she fell asleep hugging that letter, with her body in a fetal position. The Guatemalan woman who slept next to her got up at midnight and put a blanket over her without waking her. Because a mother's body, even when defeated, remains a battlefield, but the soul of a separated mother screams until the end of the world. The shelter where Andre was placed had no name, just a number, 42, written in black letters on the entrance gate. It was one of many temporary centers set up to house unaccompanied migrant children in Tucson, Arizona. A dry building surrounded by metal fences, surveillance cameras, and the promise that everything was for their own good. When Andre arrived, he still had road dust in his hair. He had cried so much his voice barely came out. He had a lost look, lips cracked from dehydration, and a heart broken into 1,000 pieces. They took him to a shared room with 7 other children. Beds lined up, all identical, rough sheets, white walls, no familiar faces. No one spoke his language. Only another child of Guatemalan origin tried to approach, but Andre didn't respond. He remained silent, hugging his empty backpack, the same one his mom had given him before crossing the border. Inside was only a crumpled drawing of a dragon he had once painted with crayons. The first days, he didn't eat. They offered him rice, juice, cookies. He rejected everything. The staff noted it in their reports. Minor shows signs of stress, does not interact, does not respond. But no one knew him. No one knew how to comfort him. When they asked his name, he barely whispered, "Andre, where's your mom?" some adults would ask. He shrugged. He didn't know if she was alive, if they had taken her far away, if she had left him. Part of him still waited for her in every corner of the shelter, but days passed and she didn't appear. And then came the doubt, the one that's worse than fear. What if she was no longer looking for him? They gave him a teddy bear, old, with a sewn ear. He called it Mommy. He slept with it hugged tight, as if he could remember Isela's smell that way, her soft voice saying, "Sleep, my love." Every night he would whisper in its ear, "Mommy's coming soon. You don't know, but she's coming." Sometimes, while other children watched TV or made drawings, Andre would sit in front of the door, staring fixedly, as if waiting for her to walk through at any moment and tell him it had all been a bad dream. A social worker tried to talk to him. He knelt in front of his bed, smiling. "Do you like to draw, Andre? Do you want crayons?" The child shook his head. Then he covered himself with the blanket up to his head. He didn't want to talk, didn't want to play, didn't want to make friends. He just wanted his mom. Weeks kept passing. The shelter had rules, time to sleep, time to eat, time for activities. Everything measured, everything ordered. But no schedule contemplated the grief of a child who was torn from the arms that gave meaning to his existence. Some days, Andre would wake up screaming, nightmares. He would call for his mother, but he only received the soft voice of a nurse telling him everything was okay. But it wasn't. Not for him, because okay was smelling his mother, feeling her embrace, eating egg and rice in a small but safe house. They took him to a psychologist. She showed him cards with happy and sad faces. He didn't respond. They offered him to draw what he felt. He only traced dark lines, shapeless. On one sheet, he wrote something that surprised everyone. "Don't forget me." He didn't sign. He just left the paper on the table and went to the corner with his bear. Every time another child was reunited with their parents, Andre would ask, "And my mom?" "Not yet, champ. Soon." But those words, which once brought hope, began to wear thin. Andre started to believe his mother wouldn't come, that maybe he'd never see her again, and then his body closed off. He became thinner, his eyes more lifeless. He no longer spoke, no longer asked. He just waited. One day, a new social worker arrived. He spoke Spanish with a Mexican accent. His name was Mateo. He was young and had a strange patience, as if he understood without asking. "Hello, Andre. They told me you like to draw. I used to draw as a child too. Andre looked at him, distrustful. Matteo returned the next day, and the next. He would sit nearby without forcing conversation. He just left paper and colored pencils on the table. On the third day, Andre drew a door. On the fourth, a figure with a long braid. On the fifth, two people holding hands. "Who are they?" Matteo asked without pressuring. "My mom and me," Andre whispered, without looking. Matteo held back tears. He knew he shouldn't get emotionally involved, but in that instant, he felt him like a son. He began reading the child's file. He found his full name, his admission date, and then, between poorly written lines and stamped forms, a brief note. Separated from asylum-seeking mother in El Paso, no contact since admission. Matteo felt anger, real anger. How was it possible that a mother and her son remained isolated after so much time? He went directly to his supervisor. "This child has been almost 3 months without knowing anything about his mother. This isn't fair. This isn't human." The woman sighed. "There are hundreds of cases like this, Matteo. The system is slow. Sometimes nothing can be done. Well, I'm going to do something." That same night, Matteo contacted a legal organization that helped reunite families. He told them Andre's story. He gave them the mother's name, Isela Mendoza. He asked them, almost begging, to do something, to search, to put the pieces together. And for the first time since his arrival, Andre's story stopped being just another file. At the shelter, he kept waiting, in front of the door, hugging his bear, not knowing that finally someone was looking for him on her behalf. The day Jorge Ramirez returned to the detention center, he carried a thicker folder under his arm and a different gleam in his eyes. Isela noticed immediately, though she tried not to get her hopes up. After so much silence, after so many broken promises, she feared believing in anything. Jorge sat across from her in the small interview room. There were no windows, just a metal table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. He took a deep breath before speaking. "Isela, we have a lead. We believe your son is in a center in Arizona. They identified him by name, age, and the drawing he made." Isela covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes immediately filled with tears. "Is he okay? Is he alive?" Jorge nodded, though cautiously. "Yes, he's alive. He's under care. We don't know much more, but the most important thing is we know where to look." Isela couldn't contain her crying. Her shoulders trembled. She had gone more than 60 days without knowing anything, without a sign, without a word. Now, that certainty, however minimal, was like clean oxygen after being submerged for too long. "And what's going to happen now?" she asked, wiping tears with her sleeve. "We've already filed an emergency motion with the immigration judge. Your case never had a formal hearing. It was a direct violation of due process. You have the right to request asylum with your son by your side, not separated from him. We're demanding immediate reunification." "How long will it take?" Jorge lowered his gaze with honesty. "I can't promise you dates, but I promise we won't stop until you're with him." That day, for the first time in weeks, Isela ate. She took a full plate of rice and beans without feeling nauseous. She walked a bit down the hallway. She showered more calmly. Something inside her had changed. It wasn't joy. It was resistance. A new strength that arose from knowing her son existed, breathed, and was closer than she had imagined. Meanwhile, in Arizona, Matteo, the young social worker at the shelter, received an unexpected call. It was a lawyer named Claudia Rivas, member of an NGO specialized in migrant family reunification. They had received Andre's case. "We got the information from your report. We've already located the mother. She's in El Paso, detained but alive. We're working with her lawyer," Claudia explained. Matteo remained silent for a few seconds. Then he smiled. "He doesn't know. Every day he sits in front of the door, waiting. He never stopped waiting for her." "Then help me. Let's prepare him. Reunification is close, and we don't want it to be traumatic. These types of reunions leave deep marks. Claudia and Jorge began coordinating. They contacted judges, public defenders, allied media, and child welfare offices. The process, though urgent, clashed with bureaucratic slowness. Forms, signatures, transfers. Each step was a mountain. But something changed. Now there were people pushing that mountain. Isela was officially informed of the reunification procedure. They explained that as soon as the judge authorized it, she would be transferred to a family center where she could reunite with Andre under supervision. She cried non-stop for hours. The other women at the center hugged her, congratulated her, some cried with her. Not everyone has that luck, a Honduran mother told her. Never stop fighting for him. Days later, finally, the court order arrived. Mother and child must be reunited immediately. It was a case of serious human rights violation, according to the judge. The system had failed. Now it had to be corrected, though late. Isela was escorted by 2 officers to a special room within the same center, adapted for family reunions. They told her to wait there, that the child was on his way. Her heart beat as if it would explode. She looked at her hands, squeezed her fingers. She wore the same blouse she was arrested in, hand-washed in the cell to be clean for the most important moment of her life. Meanwhile, Andre got into a white van with tinted windows. Mateo accompanied him. He had explained that he would see his mother soon, that she never stopped looking for him. "Does she really love me?" Andre asked quietly. Mateo swallowed the lump in his throat and responded firmly, "She loves you more than her own life." The journey was long, silent. Andre looked out the window without knowing what to expect. He was afraid it was a lie, afraid of not recognizing her, afraid of having forgotten her. Upon arrival, they guided him through cold hallways. He walked slowly, hugging his teddy bear. His bare feet made a soft sound against the polished floor. In front of a gray door, Mateo stopped. "You're about to see your mum, champ. Are you ready?" Andre didn't respond. He just hugged the bear tighter against his chest. Inside, Isela was already standing. She was trembling. Her mouth muttered prayers. She didn't know whether to scream, run, cry. When the door opened and she saw the little one standing there, her body reacted before her mind. "Andre, my love, it's me." But he didn't run. He stood still, looking at her. His face didn't change. There were no tears, no immediate joy, just confusion. Isela took a step. "It's me, my life, your mom. I'm here. I didn't leave. I never left." Andre lowered his gaze. Then he lifted the bear like a shield. He took a step, another, and then slowly he approached. When he reached her, he touched her with his hand, as if to check she was real. And then, without saying a word, he sank into her arms. Both fell to their knees, and for an instant time stopped. The room smelled of disinfectant, stale air, and walls too white to convey any sense of home. But despite the artificial environment, in that corner of the family reunification center, something sacred was about to happen. Something so profound, so human, that no protocol, no law, and no report could encompass its magnitude. Isela remained on her knees on the floor, with open arms, while her son, Andre, stood motionless in front of her. She had him right there, inches away, but he wasn't the same child she had kissed on the forehead before they tore him away. That child who used to call her mommy with tenderness now looked at her with a mixture of doubt, fear, and distrust. His face was thinner, more serious, his eyes lifeless, hair disheveled, worn clothes, rigid body like an animal that has lived in constant alert. Isela trembled. Words wouldn't come out. She didn't want to scare him, didn't want to force anything. She just whispered, "My love, it's me, Mommy." Andre didn't respond. He held the teddy bear between his hands, the same one he had named Mommy for weeks. He squeezed it tightly, as if he still couldn't let go of the only figure that had accompanied him in the darkness. A few eternal seconds passed. Then Andre took a timid step, then another. He stopped, and in a silent act he lowered the bear to the floor. He dropped it carefully, almost with guilt, as if by doing so he admitted his real mother was there, that she had returned, that she was real. That's when he ran. He ran and threw himself into Isela's arms. She caught him as if her life depended on it. She hugged him with her whole body, with her entire soul. She kissed him on the forehead, on his hair, on his shoulders. She couldn't speak. She just cried. A deep cry, contained for months. A cry that didn't need words, that only knew how to say, "I'm here. I never stopped looking for you." Andre wasn't crying, but he didn't let go of his mother. He clung to her with strength, with desperation, as if he feared that by closing his eyes, she might disappear again. No one in the room dared to interrupt. Mateo, the social worker, watched from the door with glassy eyes. Jorge, the lawyer, pressed his lips, moved. An official from the center discreetly wiped away a tear. That reunion, that moment of truth, broke hearts. Because it wasn't just the return of a mother and her son. It was the return of two human beings to their dignity, to their most elemental bond. The one that bureaucracy, protocols, and institutional coldness had tried to tear away. After several minutes in silence, Isela finally dared to speak. "Do you remember me, my life?" Andre nodded very slowly. He didn't say much, but the way he looked at her had changed. It was no longer confusion. It was recognition. "Did you think I wasn't going to come for you?" "Sometimes," he responded quietly. Isela swallowed. She didn't want to show him her pain. She just caressed his face. "But I came. See, I'm here, and I'm never going to let you go again." Andre lowered his gaze. "They told me that you weren't around anymore. That's not true. I never stopped thinking about you, not a single day." They stayed embraced for a long time. Isela's legs trembled, but she didn't dare move. It was as if any interruption could break the spell. She felt her son's little body, fragile, lighter, different. He had grown, but had also regressed emotionally. It was as if a part of him had frozen in time. She told him about the letters she had written. She described the drawings he had left in her backpack. She said she dreamed of him every night. Andre listened in silence. His eyes were fixed on her, as if trying to verify he wasn't dreaming. "Are you going to leave me again?" he suddenly asked. Isela felt a knot in her stomach. She held his face with both hands. "Never. Listen to me carefully, my love. I will never again let anyone take you from my side. Not the police, not judges, not anyone." He nodded, but didn't seem completely convinced. He had learned to distrust, to protect himself. She understood. That's why she didn't insist. Hours passed. An officer informed them they would spend the night together, in a room adapted for mothers and children. They gave them blankets, a mattress on the floor, and a tray of hot food. Andre barely touched the rice, but accepted an apple. Isela watched him eat as if it were a miracle. She smoothed his hair, carefully cleaned his hands. She didn't want to lose a second of that reunion. When they lay down, he curled up next to her. "Can we stay here forever?" "No, my love, but we're going to leave together very soon, to a place where you're safe, where you can go back to school. Would you like that?" Andre nodded. Then he closed his eyes. That night, they slept embraced, as they hadn't since crossing the border. Isela didn't sleep a wink. She stayed awake, watching him, memorizing every detail of his face, his breathing. Each heartbeat was proof that the nightmare hadn't destroyed them. The trauma, however, had left marks. The next morning, Andre woke up disoriented. It took him a few seconds to recognize her. Then he clung to her waist, like a lost puppy returning home, but afraid everything will disappear again. "Are you still here?" "I'll be here. Always." And this time, she said it with certainty. because they were no longer alone. Now they had allies, lawyers, volunteers. Now their names were no longer lost numbers in a system. Now, finally, they were visible. Although Isela and Andre could now embrace without fear, the world outside that room remained just as uncertain. Reunification had been urgently approved, yes, but the asylum process remained frozen in a sea of papers, postponed hearings, and political decisions made thousands of miles away by people who had never seen the face of a child separated from his mother. A week after the reunion, they were transferred to a temporary family center on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. There, at least, they could sleep together, share meals, and have something resembling a routine. But it wasn't freedom. They couldn't leave, couldn't work, couldn't study. It was limbo, better than separation, but still far from the dignified life they had dreamed of when leaving Honduras. Isela spent mornings reviewing her case with Jorge, the lawyer, through slow video calls full of interference. Every time the signal cut out, she felt everything teetering again. He explained that the government had denied her first application, claiming lack of conclusive evidence of direct persecution. "And lack of evidence?" Isela said one afternoon with anger. "What more do they want? For me to deliver them my son's corpse to believe me?" Jorge, patient, nodded sadly. "I know, Isela. The system isn't made to believe those who flee, but there are still paths. We're going to appeal. You're not alone." But Isela felt alone, despite the NGOs, the volunteers, the sporadic visits. Because what troubled her most was watching Andre silently struggle with his own ghosts. The child didn't speak much. Sometimes he played with other children at the center, but always from a distance. He ate slowly, slept with starts. There were nights when he woke up screaming, desperately searching for his mother. She would run to his bed, hug him, rock him like when he was a baby. "Shh, I'm here, my love, I'm here." He would cling to her with open eyes. He asked her again and again, "Are they going to separate us again?" "No, my dear, never again." But Isela couldn't promise it with a calm soul. She said it like a shield, like a prayer, like a plea. During the day, they participated in workshops offered by center volunteers, English classes, emotional support, art therapy. Isela had trouble concentrating, but drawing with Andre gave her moments of peace. He, on the other hand, painted closed houses with many locks. He almost never drew people. One afternoon, while he colored in silence, Isela asked, "What would you like to do when we get out of here?" Andre was thoughtful. Then he said, "Go to school and have a house with a door that can't be opened easily." The answer broke her soul, but it also gave her clarity. She had a mission. Beyond paperwork and documents, she had to heal her son, protect him, teach him that the world could still be safe, even though it had failed them so many times. Jorge got her an interview with an organization that granted temporary refuge and legal assistance for mothers in the asylum process. It wasn't a guarantee, but if they managed to leave the center, they could live in a transition house with access to services, counseling, and a more stable routine. The day of the interview, Isela wore the same blouse she had used at the reunion. She had hand-washed it again and again so it wouldn't lose the smell of that moment. She considered it her charm. "I want them to see who I am, for them to remember me," she told Jorge by phone. During the meeting with the NGO representatives, she spoke with a firm voice. She didn't cry. She told her story like a mother who has crossed hell and still walks. She showed the letters that were never delivered, her son's drawings, reports from the center talking about the trauma they had both suffered. She explained she didn't want charity, but justice. "My son is not a number. He's not a file. He's a child, and he deserves to live without fear." The committee members remained silent. One of them, a woman with short hair and a tired look, murmured, "Your story should never be repeated. We're going to help you." 3 days later, they received the news. They had been accepted into the protection program for migrant mothers and children. They would be assigned a temporary house in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where they could start over with psychological follow-up, classes, legal support, and access to a dedicated lawyer. Isela hugged Andre tightly. He didn't fully understand, but he felt the change in his mother. For the first time, she smiled without fear. When they boarded the bus to Albuquerque, she looked out the window with a heart full of conflicting emotions. Behind, she left months of confinement, pain, darkness. But ahead, she still didn't know what was coming. The only certainty was that now they were going together. As the bus started, Andre asked, "What if there they also want to separate us?" She looked at him and gently caressed his face. "Not anymore, my life. Not anymore." It wasn't an empty promise. It was a decision. Because although the legal battle hadn't ended, and more hearings, appeals, and endless paperwork still awaited them, Isela now knew she had a voice, that she had support, that she had, above all, something the system couldn't take away, the will to continue, for herself, for him, for the life they hadn't yet lived. The first night in Albuquerque was strangely silent. There was no sound of metal locks, no military footsteps in the hallway, no cold lights illuminating Andre's face while he slept. For the first time in a long time, mother and son lay down in a real bed with clean sheets and a door they could close from the inside. That night, Isela didn't cry. She just stayed awake, watching Andre sleep, hugging his teddy bear with half-open lips, like a child at last. The house where they were placed was small, modest but safe. They shared the space with two other migrant mothers and their children. In the kitchen, there were magnets on the fridge with emergency numbers, motivational phrases in English, and children's drawings taped up. It was a transitional place, yes, but for Isela, it was a sanctuary. The NGO team that received them provided a routine from the first day. Andre was enrolled in a local school where there were classes in Spanish and English, plus emotional support. He was afraid at first. His new backpack seemed strange, the teacher a stranger, and the children so different. But there was one particular moment that made a difference. The day he came home with a shy smile and a paper in his hand. "Today, I drew a house," he said, "and I put your name on the door." Isela crouched down, kissed his forehead and responded, "Then that house already exists, even though we don't have it yet." During the following weeks, Isela also received English classes, sessions with a therapist specialized in migratory trauma, and regular meetings with her new lawyer, Raul Martinez, a young man passionate about his work who took the case seriously and humanely. "Your case is going to be difficult," he told her at the first appointment, "but not impossible. You have history, documents, witnesses, and above all, you have something no one can deny, the truth." Isela no longer cried at every meeting. She had learned to breathe between one piece of news and another, to contain pain without it accumulating in her chest. But she hadn't stopped feeling. Every time she filled out a new form, every time she remembered the first nights without knowing where her son was, the past brushed her skin like a sharp blade. Andre, although calmer, still had invisible wounds. His therapist described him as highly sensitive, with constant vigilance response. He slept with the light on, didn't tolerate shouting, and startled if he heard a door slam shut. But there was progress. He played with other children. He started saying what he felt, though sometimes quietly. One day, while doing homework together, he asked his mother, "Are you afraid sometimes too?" Isela looked at him and finally didn't pretend. "Yes, but being afraid doesn't mean we're going to give up." He nodded, as if understanding something he couldn't explain with words. There were good days and grey days, some full of hope, others invaded by anxiety. But there was something that sustained them. They were together. The asylum case hearings began weeks later. Each one was an emotional mountain. The prosecutor coldly stated that Honduras was not a country in declared conflict, and that technically Isela could have reported to local authorities. How is she going to report to those who are also involved with the narcos? Raul interrupted in one of the sessions. Are we asking her to sign her death sentence? The judge listened, took notes, asked questions. Isela responded firmly, without embellishments. She told her story again, without tears, with a voice tempered by truth. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because if I stayed, they would kill my son. They were using him. They were marking him. I did the only thing a mother can do. I saved him. The process was slow, like everything in the system. Sometimes weeks passed without news, but every time they returned from court, Isela would put on the same blouse again, the one she wore the day of the reunion. She had turned it into a kind of personal symbol. Why do you always wear that shirt? Andre asked one morning, while combing his hair in front of the mirror. She crouched down, looked him in the eyes and said, because it reminds me that you're not lost, that I found you, that we're visible. Andre smiled. It was no longer that broken smile from the first days. It was a complete smile, though fragile, a sign that they were rebuilding themselves. Community support began to arrive. Donations of clothes, school supplies, food. A group of neighbors organized a fundraiser to pay for part of the house rent when the program ended. They offered cooking classes, guidance for paperwork, even interviews with media who wanted to tell their story. Isela declined the cameras, but accepted the workshops. My story is mine, she said, and I'll tell it when I decide. Today, they still await the final asylum resolution. They don't know if they'll be allowed to stay in the United States or if they'll have to keep fighting in other courts. But they no longer feel alone. They're not locked up. And above all, they're no longer invisible. Every morning, Isela walks Andre to school. She holds his hand and before letting go at the door, tells him the same phrase. Remember that you exist, that your life matters, that no one can make you invisible again. He nods, gives her a kiss on the cheek and runs with his backpack on his shoulder. Isela stays there, watching her son disappear among the other children. And inside, she repeats a promise that's no longer just hers. Never again will they tear you away. Never again.